again. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Anton.
My name is Vlad.
And as always, thanks for tuning in for our awesome review of the SMOK Spirals tank. But first and foremost, you might want to know the price. It comes in at $39.99 plus tax. Comes out to $45.20 if you live in Ontario, where the taxes are high. Now Vlad, tell me, what does $40 plus tax get me?
When you open the box, it shouldn't come as a surprise that you do, in fact, get a Spirals tank. You also get an extra glass piece, a pre-installed 0.6 ohm coil, which is rated for 28 watts, an extra 0.3 ohm coil rated for 35 watts, an RBA deck, as well as a manual, authenticity card, and a bunch of spare parts like O-rings, extra RBA screws, etc. Now the special thing about this SMOK Spirals tank is that it's something that Anton and I consider to be an in-between or a transition tank. And what this basically means is you typically have your low wattage tanks, the Nautilus Mini, the Nautilus X, and they fire between 10 to 20 watts. And then you have your mid to high wattage tanks such as the Clito, the Baby Beast, that fire 40 watts and above. And until now there's been a serious shortage of tanks that fire in between those two ranges, 20 to 40 watts. SMOK Spirals kind of fills that gap.
Even though it is between a mouth to lung and a direct to lung tank, the flavor is there as if it was a direct to lung tank, and the vapor production is there as if it's a mouth to lung tank. So for all of you who are complaining about my device is blowing way too much vapor, I'm hotboxing my car without even trying, I can't see my windshield, this tank does a really good job of compromising flavor and vapor production, kind of meeting in between.
I would say it's actually more flavor than you would even expect from a device like this. You compare that flavor in the 20 to 40 range, and I don't think we've ever seen a tank so flavorful.
Unless it's a rebuildable.
Unless it's a rebuildable, unless we're talking about, you know, the $200 Izzy.
Now let's talk a little bit about the design, because this thing has a couple of cool features that I do really enjoy. The first and foremost, coolest and best feature about this thing is that it is a top fill. Even though it is a top fill, it's a little different than what we're used to with tanks like the Nautilus X or the Clito. This is similar to the Triton 2, where you actually screw off the top part, which is connected to your drip tip, and fill it in through slots on the side. When I had the Triton 2, my biggest problem with it was that the top fill cap just got jammed all that time. Open. I literally started carrying a pair of pliers with me just in case I ran out of juice throughout the day. Best thing about this tank is the threading is as smooth as butter. It takes about a spin and a half to fully close or to fully open.
I also really like the understated knurling on the top cap. It's very easy to grab a hold of. It's not too slippery. I haven't had any issues taking it off, and I've been using it for more than a week now.
You don't really care about that. What you really probably want to know is how this tank performs. When I switched over to this tank beforehand, I was using the TF-V8, which I usually vape at about 100 to 120 watts. When I switched these tanks over, I made sure my coil is super primed. I took a couple of primer pulls. I made sure it's nice and ready. I pressed the fire button. First hit was burnt to all hell. I literally thought I was inhaling fire. I looked at my screen and obviously I forgot to turn down my wattage, and I was firing at 120. I thought, alright, well, there goes one coil out of the box. I turned down the wattage, put it in my mouth, pressed the fire button, started vaping, and was really surprised to see my coil was not damaged.
I think one of the main reasons why Anton's coil didn't burn from the get-go is because SMOK has chosen to include a large amount of juice ports on this tank. Now, if you look at either coil, the 0.3 or the 0.6 ohm, you're gonna see that there are about 8 juice ports per coil. What that means is you get incredibly fast wicking.
Now, I'd just like to work off something you said, Vlad, and there aren't about 8 juice holes, there's exactly 8 juice holes. Another thing I really enjoy about these coils is that if you take a look at them, they're just stuffed with cotton. At first I thought this is gonna be another flop, this isn't gonna work, they overdid it, and this tank is gonna be firing at 50-60 watts. When I started vaping at 35 watts, I was surprised. I didn't expect it to work as well as it does, and in fact this kind of won brownie points for me.
That was one of my worries going in. As soon as I opened the box and I took a look at the coils, and I thought there's just no way in hell it's gonna feed properly. I'm gonna get good flavor at 25 watts, and thankfully I was proven wrong. This tank is actually quite flavorful. Now I do have a theory as to why that is.
Let's hear it, Vlad.
If you guys are familiar with Genesis style tanks or Jennies, you would know that the leading theory behind that style of tank is that the closer the coil is to your mouth, the more flavorful the vape is. Now, if you take a look at the design of the Spirals, it becomes very clear that the chimney was specially designed to be quite short. And I do think this is one of the reasons why the flavor is so phenomenal on this tank. It's a very short chimney, and you lose very little of that flavor on the way.
There is one thing about this tank that really kind of irked me, so to speak. I had Nick, our local wizard, build me a fantastic coil, and I just sat there watching him struggle fitting it into the RBA deck time and time again. He must have gone through 3 or 4 coils before we actually succeeded in using the side of the screw to hold down the coil in place. This tank does lose half a point for me in that specific category because I'm not experienced enough to fit a coil in there like that, and that's kind of a downside for me.
It's a mess, it's a nightmare, and as wonderful as it tastes, I really do not recommend using the RBA deck on the Spirals.
Yeah, as soon as I started having issues, I just switched down to the 0.3 ohm coil, and it just works.
And speaking of the 0.3, which do you enjoy more?
Personally, I like the lower ohmage. I do like my vapor a little bit warmer, so I am using the 0.3 ohm coil.
I don't have too much experience with the 0.3 yet. In fact, I just installed it earlier this morning. And this is actually a testament to the quality of these SMOK Spirals coils. Typically, I have a coil last me anywhere from 3 days to 7 days.
Oh, yeah.
That applies to, you know, the Cleto, that applies to the TFE8. I was actually using the pre-installed 0.6 for almost 2 weeks. For me, for someone that used to go through 30-40 milliliters of juice a day, that's unheard of. So while I am enjoying the 0.3s, the 0.6 are winners for me. Haven't had a coil last me that long, ever.
Let's take this away over to my favorite part. Let's talk about the pros and cons of this bad boy.
Biggest pro, best sub 40 watt tank on the market right now.
I would say my biggest pro is the fact that this guy does not go through juice like the TFE8.
I would agree with that, and there's another auxiliary benefit to that as well. Because you're firing on such a low wattage, your battery life is going to increase.
For those of you who vape a whole bunch of juice in a day, this tank might be slightly too small. You might have to get back to the idea of carrying along with you an emergency bottle for those moments when you do run out of juice and find yourself with an empty tank. This tank does tend to get a little noisy when it is on a very restricted airflow.
It only really pops up on one particular setting. Ideally, you want to either have it completely open or almost all the way closed for the best acoustics. As soon as you go halfway, it starts whistling.
And then there is, obviously, as we mentioned before, the RBA deck. I personally am probably going to refrain from using it just because of the difficulty that I've had with it initially. However, if you're a tinker and are stubborn enough to make it work, you're not going to be disappointed. We've covered my favorite part of our videos, and I'm sure we've covered Vlad's favorite part of the video, and I think now it's time for your favorite part of the video, our viewers. We're glad to announce that we will be giving away a free SMOK Spirals tank to one lucky viewer who will be commenting below and letting us know what they thought about the video, what their thoughts about the tank are, and whether or not they would go out and pick one for themselves. As always, guys, thank you for watching, thank you for commenting, thank you for subscribing, liking, and loving and sharing.
And if you haven't done those things, do those things.
Do them.
And then we thank you for that.
In advance.
In advance.
Until next time, guys, take it easy.
Stay cloudy.